What is up, Coordination? On the pod today, we have Taylor Monahan, who is the founder of MyEtherWallet, MyCrypto, which are two early wallets that have been around in the space since the space has been around. And she is now a security researcher and is building MetaMask at Consensys. On this podcast, we talk about Taylor's experience building wallets, but also Taylor's experience being a white hat person who basically investigates hacks and rug pulls and people who have lost their funds in the Web3 ecosystem. And I think that Taylor's just got this really strong character, storytelling ability, but also the ability to use the blockchain and use forensic tools to figure out people who have gotten hacked, what happened, what was the attack vector, and sometimes is helpful in helping remediate the hack. And so we talk on this episode a little bit about those war stories and Taylor's experiences from that. But the thing I really wanted to get out of this is that GreenPilled is all about regenerative crypto economics and how crypto can be pro-social, good for the world. So how do we stop it from being bad for the world? If you lost all of your money in a DeFi hack or your seed phrase got compromised and you lost everything, then you're probably out of the ecosystem. And the ecosystem had a profoundly negative impact on your life. And if that's happened to you, then my heart goes out to you. And so before crypto can be good for the world, before we can regenerate the world with crypto, we have to stop crypto from being bad for the world. So we kind of talk a little bit at the meta level about how crypto can stop being bad for the world. What's the incentive structure and the technology structure that could lead towards that? And we also talk about just sort of the object level war stories that Taylor has gone through. So I just have a profound amount of respect for Taylor as a good faith ecosystem participant, as someone who has helped a lot of people in a lot of different places, and the security community. And I think that there's a real opportunity to create a public good for the space of remediating these hacks in a more fundamentally, systematically defensible way. So with the sovereignty of custodying your own funds comes the responsibility of making sure that people don't hack them. And so how do we teach people how to survive and hang in this world in a way that respects their sovereignty and is not paternalistic, but also at a systemic level stops the incentive landscape that causes people to want to hack people and stop en masse the people that are losing all of their money in crypto when their seed phrase gets hacked or there's malware on their computer or something like that. So we are talking about solving crypto hacks in this episode with Taylor Monahan. I think it's one of the most interesting episodes that we've done. So I think you're going to enjoy it.
ATHENA DAO is addressing the underfunded areas of women's health, such as menopause and endometriosis. ATHENA is a community-driven DAO, giving women a say in decision-making and funding the scientific breakthroughs that impact their lives. With cutting-edge technology like Molecule's IP NFT framework, they invest in research IP that ensures exclusive licensing rights. ATHENA DAO is raising awareness to women's health research, working alongside existing organizations. So join ATHENA DAO today to help change the landscape of women's health research.
What's up, Taylor? How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Thanks so much for making the time to chat with us. Really excited to talk about your experience white hatting and hunting down people who have hacked DeFi projects and just generally hacked crypto. So maybe we'll tee it off with what's the most interesting hacking white hat story that you can think of right now?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. I think that I'm always fascinated by the hackbacks. I call them hackbacks. Mm-hmm. The ones where like a black hat hacks a thing and then like a security research group or a white hat group hacks back the funds somehow. Sometimes it's because the hacker has some janky code that they're able to like get, their foot in the door. Sometimes it's like more like a race condition or, some parameters or whatever. But those I think are endlessly fascinating and like a whole can of worms in terms of the legality. Like who is hacking who is the good guy, who's the bad guy. It opens up all those questions, which are, always fun.
Yeah. What's interesting about the space is this community of researchers, security researchers, and white hats. Like, I put like Sam Z Sun, and Zach XBT, and you, this community that is formed in order to investigate and track down various hackers who have probably ruined people's lives by taking this money.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy how long we've been doing it. Like, even Zach, who's sort of, I guess, like the freshest one, he's been like going nonstop for over 2 years at this point. So I don't know how, like, what the personality traits or like the nature versus nurture like shaped us to like be these people that end up in this position. But I don't know. It's probably like one of the most satisfying things that I take part in.
Yeah. I mean, I know that I get a dopamine rush when I solve a problem, but I imagine that when you are using all these blockchain forensic tools and you have tracked down where the funds get gone and then maybe squeezed a hacker to return a portion of the funds, that's got to be a really satisfying moment for the community of white hats.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And there's different ways that things happen, and some of them are more like social pressure. I think Zach is a good example of like the power of sort of the social structures and just how much like just putting information out there can do. It's incredibly powerful. I think we forget that in this space a lot because it's, a lot of times we focus on the tech and what's possible and what's not. And it's like, hey, you can also just tweet something and change people's behavior. Who knew?
Yeah.
But it's like, for me, it's twofold. Like, the satisfaction comes from, like, at the end of the day, like helping people who lost money, like not lose as much money, or at least at least have some amount of like closure or information about where their funds went. I think it's also satisfying to think that, like when somebody either returns the funds or there's a recovery made, or you just blast someone on social media and their name is now out there, that probably acts as like a disincentive for future people who might choose to go down that road and become a thief. And then the other half of it, though, is like the blockchain, like is the fully public ledger, so you can actually go and follow the money. Obviously, people have like a lot of techniques that they use to try to obfuscate where the funds go. It's not like, Zach makes it look really easy. I probably make it look quite easy as well, but there's a lot of places you can go wrong. And it's like, I don't know, I kind of describe it like math without the math part of it. But it's like there's one right answer as to where the funds went. And you can go down like a lot of different roads that are totally wrong or somewhat wrong. But when you actually figure it out and you put all the pieces together and get that, that one right answer, then it's like, it's like solving a math problem, but again, without the math, which is probably what it's.
Yeah. Well, I'm just kind of in awe of the work that the security researchers, yourself included, have done here. And I think that I was watching a documentary one time about, maybe it was Quadrita X, a documentary about the founder. They're rugged, and I saw you in the interview on that, and I was like, I know her. That's so cool that you're whiteheading that. In this episode, I want to kind of like go back and forth between the tangible sort of like war stories of white hatting these hacks, but I also want to drop this meta question in there, which is, how does crypto stop being bad for the world? So, this podcast is all about how do we make crypto that's pro-social, pro-environmental, and has a positive effect on people's lives. And one of the things that I feel actually kind of makes me cringe because I am in this idea space, people put me on panels called How Crypto is Saving the World. I'm like, no, my whole thing is how crypto could be good for the world, right? But we're not doing it yet. And I think that for crypto to be good for the world, we have to stop letting it be bad for the world. So net, how do we make it more expensive to attack and to rug these projects than it is to defend? and shift the balance such that it's not a common occurrence anymore, I think is like the meta thread that I want to pull through. And then we can go back and forth between the object level and that sort of meta level question. But maybe I'll just tee that back to you. How does crypto stop being bad for the world at just like a fundamental level? How do we stop all these hacks from happening, or if they do happen, remediate them systematically?
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem right now, and it's been sort of the biggest problem for a while now, is the fact that it is, it's just like, it's so directly profitable to steal funds in any number of ways, like hacking, like a DeFi protocol or a centralized exchange is one of those ways. But you also have like phishing. You also have like the Twitter reply bots that try to trick you into signing a transaction. You also have, I think the one that's been going around this week is like the fake Coinbase support scam call, where they like call you and like say that your account like something, and it just, all of these actors are just getting really creative, and they'll do whatever they can to try to steal your crypto. And I think that in order to make that not the case, you have to sort of give people ways to, I guess, say, be financially profitable or stable or whatever without stealing, right? Because if it's just so freaking easy to deceive people and steal and that kind of stuff, then, you know, a large number of people are going to do that over the
right.
And I think like over time, I've come to realize one of the bigger, or not bigger, but one of like the things that crypto just really historically has not spent a lot of time or energy or resources doing is like, when a theft happens or when a hack happens, like what are the measures that we take to create some sort of risk for the bad actor?
Right.
And so if you are considering hacking or stealing or phishing or whatever it is, it's sort of like right now in your head, you're analyzing like, okay, so I can spend this much energy and make this much money. And if the amount of money I make is more than the energy or the resources that I expend, then that sounds great. Let's do that. Normally, like, also have this other factor, which is like risk of being caught, risk of going to jail, risk of having people find out that you're a terrible person and holding you accountable for your actions. And in crypto, it's just like, you know, there's been like a few incidents where, like the DAO, notably, is like the biggest example of this, where the community, the ecosystem has said like, no, like that's not okay. At the same time, though, the DAO hacker is, the alleged DAO hacker, I guess, is known. He's in the space. He's always worked in the space. He did an ICO. Like, that's crazy to me. And you know, it took a couple of years to figure that out. But like, you know, when Lorshin published that was based on really solid research. And I'm not sure that the community like rejected him. And that those are the sorts of things that blow my mind a lot, is like, there's just like, I don't know, there's just no risk. Like there's no downside to hacking at this point. Like it's absurd.
So it feels like net, and this might be too reductionist, but there has to be a risk to attacking a system and draining the funds, or attacking a person and draining funds, whether it's legal risk or social risk or financial risk. And that risk the expected value of it has to outweigh the reward that you would get doing it. And also people just need other sources of income, so the hacking's not an attractive career path. That might be too reductionist, but that's kind of the thing that I heard there. Like there's going to be an infinite number of channels that will open up, from like SMS like in the phone call phishing attacks and like faking being a DeFi app. Like there'll be infinite channels that'll open up unless we solve for those core things. Is that too reductionist? Is that fair?
No, I think that's good, because it's a huge idea, and I don't think it's too reductionist. I think that like there's a lot of like trails out from it, but that at the core, well, that's what we need to do.
It feels like Geez, I mean, this spirals really quickly for me into income inequality being a root cause of people wanting to hack. Like if they had UBI, they would have no reason why they had to hack in order to meet subsistence level. I mean, maybe some people would do it for the thrill or the financial outcomes of it, but you get quickly into an issue where crypto being bad for the world or these hacks happening spirals out into societal issues really quick, and societal inequality into the politics pretty quick.
Yeah, no, 100%. And another interesting thing that we see a lot is like, a lot of the attackers, not all of them, but a lot of them are from nation states with high levels of corruption at like the nation state level. And also nation states where quality of life, like there just aren't a lot of options. And it's sort of, become, it's maybe not like good to steal, but it's definitely not bad to steal. Sort of like, we're all trying to make it in our lives and life is hard. And if you can find a way to, provide for your family, then that's what you should do. And that kind of dominates over the, in the West. It's still not okay to steal generally, even if it's to provide for your family.
I remember being in a country, which I won't say which country it is, but I remember that there was a history of Western imperialism in that country. And it was kind of socially okay to steal from Westerners, and especially white dudes like me, because it was easy to justify in the, their culture has been dominating ours for hundreds of years. What's the big deal if I rob them or something like that? And I just think that maybe this is an example of that. Like, so there's not strong legal and social protections in these jurisdictions that create risk for the hackers.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I think the other thing to keep in mind is like, there's actually very few, like, I don't know of one, I'm sure they exist, but like, there's very few hackers that are like true, like purely bad people, if that makes sense, like psychopaths or like sociopaths. Like they're not usually like that. There's a lot of justification that happens. The amount of justification, or, sometimes it's just like avoidance or whatever, but generally speaking, as humans, we like to consider ourselves as like good people. And that's the same for hackers. Like if you, have an honest conversation with them, they will usually, I'll say if you open up a conversation and don't judge them, they'll usually tell you, their thoughts, and it'll be full of justification. It's quite hard to have those conversations because it's, infuriating, like just straight infuriating. But, if you listen to them, there's a lot of justifications as to, why this is okay, like why they had to do this. There's a lot in the DeFi stuff, especially. There's a lot of times where it's to, like they didn't feel listened to by the team that they hacked. Like they tried to warn that it was or something, and the team didn't.
That is a problem I've seen, is that, there'll be a bounty for someone to report. If you report like $1 billion exploit, you get like $10,000 or something like that. And that incentive structure of offering the white hats peanuts while the black hats can get, like beachfront real estate with that amount of money. I think that incentive system is maybe part of that. But it sounds like it's also a social thing. Like it's like a respect thing. Like I want them to see me kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, one thing that, over the years I've learned is like people feeling heard is probably like one of the most critical things that you can do in life in general. Like it's, if you make your team feel heard, if you make your colleagues feel heard, if you make your peers feel heard, generally speaking, they are like, life is better, less bad things happen. I think a lot of times, especially with like crypto, because it's so international and so much of the communication is text-based, that a lot of people like just, they don't feel heard. And if you untangle it enough, though, it's not that,
right.
It's not usually like bad intentions. Like the team wasn't usually like trying to be idiots and not listening, But, from the hacker's perspective, or frankly anyone's perspective, it does feel like, yeah, why wouldn't they listen to me? Okay, let me do this and let me prove it, now they'll listen to me, that kind of attitude.
Yeah. So it feels like you always spend a lot of time in this space thinking about programming our values into our money and programming crypto economic systems. My ultimate example of this is how in 2017, billions of capital was raised by people who thought that if you just take a human and you put a token into it, you get out in action, like rational crypto economic actors. But it feels like there's a lot of like emotional intelligence and cultural building and psychological safety and acceptance that you can get all, like, if you have that complementary skill set to your programming skill set, then there's a lot that you can get out of social engineering and working not only with your team, but with the attackers to get the funds back.
Yeah, 100%. And it, again, it goes back to this idea that like, we're humans and we think we're good. And we, if you, whether it's before a hack or after a hack, if you sort of make it easier for the person to be good than bad, especially after a hack, if you make it easy for them to sort of take the path that you want, and you also, like you don't, again, it's like you don't judge them for it. You don't force them to like confront their badness or their failures or whatever it may be. Usually they'll take that path. I think most people would, right? It's like, if you can take the easy path and you don't have to acknowledge that you're bad, you don't have to confront it. Like, all right, cool, I'm good. Let's go there.
I think the trend of the recent hackers, I think it was the Euler Finance hack recently, that they returned 90% of the funds and they got to keep 10% as like a security bounty or something like that. I thought that was a really heartening outcome. I'm not sure the exact numbers there, so don't quote me, but do you see that as an increasing way that we reach an equilibrium, is that most of the funds are returned in exchange for not pursuing the hacker anymore?
I think that it's incredibly exciting. I think that ideally we have systems in place where like you have less hacks in general, and more structures that like either prevent the hacks or have some like, I don't know, some automated way to, if a person wants to hack it, but they don't actually hack it, they don't actually take the funds go somewhere else or something like that. I think that would be better than like everyone get in a war room and figure out how to negotiate with the hacker. And that was a sizable one. I think it was like, roughly the amount stolen was like 190 million. So the fact that over 90% of the funds were returned was absolutely epic. I think it's a testament to like just how like you shouldn't have really any like assumptions about who your hacker is or what their intentions were or what they may or may not do. If you leave the door open and you kind of assume that like, hey, they might be a good person in their deep soul and they might return the funds, like you might get surprised by the outcome.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you had a magic wand and you could do one thing to systemically re-architect any part of the ecosystem in order to favor the defenders instead of the attackers, what would it be? If you had a magic wand, what are the highest leverage points that you think could fundamentally make the ecosystem more resistant to, let's call it antisocial behavior, maladaptive behavior for the ecosystem?
So the one thing that it's always tricky, and this is the reason why this ecosystem historically has not like, jumped to like taking drastic measures to recover funds, is that you don't, like the whole point of crypto is to put the power in people's hands and to give people control, and also to prevent like a single group or authority or state or whatever from having control over another person. And so it makes it really hard to have discussions about like, oh, well, if a hacker hacks something and then a group decides to like take those funds back, then that's a person or a group having authority over another person, and then get into like slippery slope arguments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that like we should acknowledge that the fact that like the person hacked this thing and stole these funds, that's also very much a situation where this one person has forcibly taken control and taken the power from a huge group of people. And I think when you start to, consider that, like, in my opinion, like the property rights things, like the ideas around property rights that are like the OG Bitcoin ideas, and then allowing theft to happen, like they're not compatible ideas. Like if a person steals your property, that's a violation of your property rights. It's actually not a violation to take the funds back. Like that's like restoring the property right. Like that's restoring the person's rights and their property to themselves. Like it's just, you know what I mean? But
yes.
That's like the idea that like always bugs me.
So I just had Glenn Weil from Radical Markets and Radical Exchange on, along with Danielle Allen, who is a researcher, and they just wrote a paper about Web3 ethics, and they actually highlighted this exact thing. The question is, do we want to architect our legal system, our digital web scale legal system, to be oriented around just one form of domination, which is, can I take this property or not from someone? Or do we want to, which is like the Bitcoiner argument of like, not your keys, not your coins. If you have your keys, then you're self-sovereign. Or do we want to think about all different types of domination? And the domination of, oh, I hacked you is another type of domination that can't be easily encoded into the property rights system of a smart contract. And then there's also kind of like systemic corruption or systemic biases and all these other different types of domination. And so I think a big difference in the two like schools of thought here is, do we want to just have a narrow view of what domination is, or do we want to look at all different types of domination? And then you get into, it's more complicated, but it's more comprehensive.
Yeah. And I'm like, when I sort of look at crypto on the whole, I feel like a lot of times we operate in these very like black and white areas, which are like at opposing ends of the spectrum. And we just like almost forget that like there's a whole area in the middle where, it's not clean. It's not simple. It's not black and white, but there's like a lot of different avenues that can be utilized to, adjust the incentives or adjust the outcomes or, make it more likely that recovery is possible or, whatever it may be. And I think that like, especially in a growing, emerging ecosystem, like we should be playing in those gray areas a lot more. I think the slippery slope arguments have been like so dominant that it restricts our ability to like think creatively and creatively problem solve. I think that is like probably like that is like probably one of the most depressing things because, as systems get more mature, they're harder to, it's harder to play in those gray areas, right? Like early days are, should be full of experimentation because that's where, the magic can happen. Once systems are built out and matured, it's you don't get that freedom anymore. And so I wish we did more of that. I also think there are probably some things with like system design in general that could enable any number of things, but we just don't even, again, we don't think about them. We don't consider that a thing. We don't bake it into the system design from the get-go. But yeah, I feel like we code anything. So there should be a way to code a thing where, if a hack happens, XYZ also happens, or it triggers this, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. So this is an interesting point about how when systems ossify over time and there's more precedent set, there's kind of a constrained space where actors can act from like a complex systems perspective. And it feels like we've kind of followed the Bitcoin style design of code is law and your property rights are your property rights to its logical conclusion. And now that we can program our values into our money, what are the ways in which we could build more anti-fragile systems against hacks where there's ways of remediating that or preventing that? And I feel like we're still exploring that design space. a little bit as the ecosystem matures. But it's also existential. It's like a race against time, because if there's another bull market and there's 5x more capital in the space, that's 5x more incentive for hackers to come a hacking. And so yeah, I mean, I hope to be able to highlight more people that are working on creating anti-fragility and reactivity against hacks, but not giving up on the principles of decentralization and justice that I think that we've gotten also. And that's the line we have to thread.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like the, when I consider the different avenues and things that, can be utilized, I always kind of go back to this fundamental premise that if the end user is not in control of their funds, if the end user is not able to, take actions that they want without anyone else's permission, then that's not crypto, in my opinion, right? So anything that we do has to sort of like, that's sort of like the line in the sand. The second you start to take power away from people, the second you start to like, it turns into like paternalism really quickly as well. So like, oh, let me take this action on behalf of the user, or let me prevent the user automatically from taking this action because we know better than the user. And like, no, we can't go there. Like that's where it gets, in my opinion, that's where it gets really dangerous, because, at the end of the day, the user, I won't say the user always knows what's best, but the user should know what's best. And like, if they're informed and educated, then they do know what's best for them, and you don't. And you shouldn't ever, you should not ever delude yourself into thinking that you know better than someone else,
Yeah. It feels like we've all grown up in this sort of like paternalistic nanny state where we've had our sort of sovereignty clipped a little bit, but it's kept us safe. And there's almost a certain amount of unlearning that you need in order to become sovereign and responsible for yourself. And I think that needs to be part of the crypto onboarding journey is like, hey, you don't have, the training wheels are kind of off a little bit. And in that sense, I think education is anti-fragility, but also people have to learn for themselves. They have to touch the hot stove so that they know not to do it again. So like one of the ideas I was talking about with one of my friends is like, baby's first rug, like put some money into a smart contract, like $5, and watch it get taken away from you. So that way that makes you more preventative against losing your life savings or something like that.
Yeah. Dan and Aaron at MetaMask had a similar one where they wanted to allow anyone to make like a Ponzi coin, like anyone, like just press one button to make a Ponzi coin. And like the rationale behind this, right, was that like, if you realize that you have the power to create a Ponzi out of thin air like that, then you are less likely to get taken by a Ponzi. Like it'll make Ponzi's like just worthless. But yeah, there's like, I don't know. There's like, that's the thing about this space is like, it's so empowering. Like once you realize what crypto is doing, then that is the most empowering thing. And then in turn, you understand, like, one, you'll understand like why there are hackers and people chasing you down, but you'll also like have a deeper appreciation and understanding of the responsibility that you have over your own digital assets, or facets of your identity, or whatever it may be. And I think that right now, and like I've done this for years, but I think we try to educate them about like how to protect themselves from scams or protect themselves from hacks. But if you don't have that underlying understanding and appreciation for like what the sovereignty actually is and what that means and how that relates to your wallet and your keys and your coins, then we're just like kind of like brute forcing like these lessons. And then the second that the attacker like changes one little aspect, then the education's like people don't map it in their heads or whatever. Where I found like for myself, the most successful thing to do is like just be incredibly sort of skeptical and a bit paranoid. Like this is mine. Like, and if you want it, you better
prove it to me.
Like, truly sell it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to me, I think education is the ultimate anti-fragility. And if there's a stop along the way where the user is installing a wallet, backing up their seed phrase, getting ETH off of Coinbase. And like, maybe their job to be done is to buy SafeMoon or something like that. If there's like a little loop to the side where you get educated about the path here and there, then you sort of increase the sovereignty through education over time. And I think the problem is that people just don't really like when I'm trying to do something, I just click through the dialogue. I don't even read the dialogue boxes. And I have a computer science degree, so I'm wondering, what Joe the plumber, someone without a computer science degree, would be doing there. And it's one of those great power, great responsibility things. I think like the Spider-Man quote of when you have great power comes great responsibility. How can we make people worthy of the power that this technology gives them?
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, like it doesn't matter how smart or how computer science oriented they are, like they all click through the dialogues. None of them read anything.
Yeah.
The biggest product challenge with wallets is forcing people to slow down and like break them out of their
pattern interrupt
all the time. And like my favorite example of this is like the early Mu dialogue that I threw up there in 2017 during the ICO era when the loss was just like overwhelming. I used every single like UX product design lesson I had ever learned to like do the opposite deliberately. So like there was a modal, it interrupted you. There was no X button. You couldn't click out of it. The height of the panel was different every time you clicked through. And so the buttons would hop around. So you couldn't just tap. Like you had to like click and then like you had to clean the button again. It was like, I felt like such an evil person. Like it's the worst.
Yeah.
It was like every lesson. But I just wanted them to like, I just so desperately wanted them to read it and like consume any of it.
Right.
Please slow down. And we're doing the same thing with MetaMask and the confirmation screens now, right? Like every single, whether it's the permits or the set approval for all or the approve or whatever, there's like 12 of them. I think we have like custom designs for now. Every single pattern that we're exploring is around getting the person to like slow down, to understand what they're actually signing so that they can be informed about the action that they're taking. Because, not all dApps are trustworthy, obviously, but even trustworthy apps sometimes like, the action that the user sort of thinks they're taking or assumes that they're taking is not necessarily the action. It's like, it's not just the phishing sites. It's also the legit ones that aren't super clear sometimes. And it's incredibly difficult. It's like, it's so hard.
Yeah. So for the uninitiated, Mu stands for MyEtherWallet. Taylor was the founder of that. That's what it was called before MyCrypto. And in the ICO boom, you would trap users before they tried to send money to something and say, "Are you sure?" Not let them out. I think that's like a funny UX pattern that you did there.
Yeah, it was 10 pages, by the way. It was 10 like education pages on like what this crypto thing was, like being your own bank. Like fishers will try to fish you. This could be a fake site. Like it was the whole gambit. 10 pages. It was absurd. We got a lot of hate for that. Twitter constantly would get very upset, because especially people that were using the product every day, it's like, please stop, please. No regrets.
I've also seen your tweets about the support inbox and the emails that you get when someone does get rugged and they're hoping that you can help them. And it just must also be heartbreaking. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't, kind of with the product design. Yeah.
I still spend time in the support box, by the way. And the MetaMask support box today it's very much similar to, the Mu support box in 2017. Like it's just a constant stream of people who, have lost money, they think they lost money. Like sometimes they haven't. Sometimes it's just that they don't have ETH, they have WETH, or they don't have ETH on Ethereum, they have WETH on Polygon or on BNB or whatever it's called now. And those are like the best cases where we just have to cycle through the networks and the tokens to find like the match. Most times it's like, they wake up and their funds are gone. that's heartbreaking. Like I hate those. Like I hate that because I can imagine what it feels like to like wake up, look at your wallet and be like, what? Like, where should it go? The ones that really get me though, that aren't really as much known about in the West they're like sort of the pig butchering scams. They are essentially, it's insane. But there's basically like scam centers, it's like a chain of exploitation basically. But there's like these scam centers in places like Laos and Cambodia where you have people whose job it is basically to sit there and like build relationships with people. And these aren't even crypto people. These are just normal people. So they go on WhatsApp or LinkedIn, they do this thing where they'll like message, like send a text message. And then if the person's like, oh, I think you have the wrong number. And then they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was
my friend
so-and-so in Boston. And then like the target is like, oh, I'm in Boston. Like, are you in Boston? And then like they somehow like develop this huge relationship. It's like a month's, sometimes a year-long effort. They'll talk like every single day. And what ultimately they'll do is sort of introduce money into the conversation. One lady's story was like just heartbreaking. She has some sort of injury. And so she has like a lot of different pains and, some days are worse than other type situation. So this scammer every day would like ask her how her pain was and then would be like, man, it would be so nice if you had a little bit more money so that like on those days you don't have to go to work. Like for months, this guy did this to this lady. And then eventually they go, well, I got my money from crypto. And everyone's heard of crypto these days. Most of the people that are, taken by this scam are aware of crypto, but they've like always found it too scary or too overwhelming or whatever it is. But now that they have this trusted person telling them like, oh, it's not that hard. You get on crypto.com. They'll walk them through setting up the account. Then they'll walk them through setting up their MetaMask. They literally get the person to go from like 0 to 1 in terms of crypto. They literally onboard.
Right.
Insane. And then they push them onto a fake app, which is like it's like terrible. There's like a bunch of them, but the concept is always the same. You deposit your money into this app, and then you can see the returns. Like in the DApp interface, it's very similar to the compound situation where like you put your money in and then you see your money and then like the number go up. But like it's all fake. The second that they deposit their funds, they either like just send them away or they do like an infinite approval. And so every time they deposit more USDT or USDC, it just gets swept out to the hackers. We don't hear from these people for months. Like a lot of times they'll reach out to us because they're talking to like support on that site, and that support person like stopped responding or blocked them or something. And so then and only then do they reach out to us because there's a support button in your MetaMask. And a lot of times they don't even realize it's a scam. Like a lot of times they're trying to like bribe us or help, like get us to help them withdraw their money or whatever it may be. It's like, it's mind blowing. So May right now, we're getting tickets from people that they were first contacted on LinkedIn or WhatsApp or whatever back in October.
Wow. That's, it's heartbreaking. I actually, I think, I was a target of one of these pig butchering attacks, and I was asking one of my security friends what they're doing, and they were explaining it all to me. I was like, well, at least my secret is just not having that much money in crypto. So I guess, does it happen to only like I feel like people think that I might have more money in crypto because I'm a founder of a project, but it's like a public goods project. And does it only happen to like high profile people, or is it like your everyday citizen can be pig butchered also?
Yeah, so there's like a couple different flavors of it, but the ones that I've been paying attention to mostly are actually people that like were never in crypto at all. They were just like random people. Because those blow my mind because they onboard people to crypto to steal their money. Like they're quite literally like using crypto.
Wow.
as this mechanism, both probably because it's they can like get the money and then there's not like a chance of the bank like freezing it or whatever. But I think it's also there's a whole like there's this whole like passive returns financial freedom like narrative that they're using as part of their scam. And it kind of, again, once again, like going back to that idea where you can educate people about scams. So you educate them about like, say like Nigerian print scam. But then if you just like you do the exact same scam, but you just change the word. So it's no longer Nigeria and a prince. It's, it's whatever, crypto, passive income, whatever it is, like that suddenly it bypasses people's, red flag detector. And success for the hacker scammers.
It kind of reminds me of like evolution in nature, like the evolution of parasitic organisms that like have to, if you're a cancer or a virus, you have to consume consume as many resources from your host, but then you eventually consume your host and you have to move on. And of course there's an adversarial game in nature where there are antibodies and there's a defense mechanism and an immune system that evolves. And it feels like we're sort of like speed running that, but for finance and globalization in this space. And I'll be curious to see if there's a decentralized immune system that develops against this in any sort of way. And if so, what it looks like. But I guess I'm just wondering from your standpoint, like 1 out of 10, 1 to 10, 1 being we're never going to solve this, and 10 we're going to solve it one day. Where do you stand, and what would it take for you to get to a 10?
Yeah, I think that we're getting a lot better. Back in, I didn't like follow things like the big cases and the big scam operations as closely back in like 2017, 2018, but I've heard stories and like, a lot of the big hackers, including like North Korea and stuff, they were getting 99, 90, let's say 90% plus of funds that they stole, they would be able to get out into the real world or use to purchase goods or cash or whatever it is. And today that number is much lower. There's, there's no database right now. There's a database of all the hacks. There's not a database of all of the recoveries and freezings and stuff, but Tether is impressing me. Never thought I'd say that, but they are sort of like coming up with they have their own system that they've sort of like evolved over time in terms of like, how do you have sufficient evidence or proof or whatever to like say like, for both Tether and for the victim or investigators or whatever, to agree that like, yes, this is definitively stolen funds, and then Tether will freeze it. Like they'll freeze it if it's if those funds are stolen, they'll freeze it. And they're not, unlike USDC and Centers or Coinbase, like they're not doing it in a US centric way. They're very much like accepting that like people are being victimized everywhere around the globe, and so therefore the system that they're sort of like they've sort of half spun up or are in the process of spinning up or whatever you want to call it, is very much like international. Like,
right.
How do you like, there's no like, you want to prove law enforcement, like in an international thing, like you can't be like, okay, upload your, FBI ID.
Yeah. Police report.
They have someone prove that they have some authority in some jurisdiction, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been really interesting to watch, but I have hopes in like, that's one avenue. I think that like, I have some high hopes for like the centralized entities in the space who have that power, will figure out ways to, come up with ways to without abusing that power, hopefully.
Yeah. That's the knife's edge, is how do you, provide this power, but also not give it in an authoritarian way? How do you bound it by a process? And hopefully with programmability and immutability, someone should be able to design a system that's hopefully fair and just
Yeah. I also think that one interesting thing is that, Tether is not a nation state. You don't have to use Tether. Nobody has to use Tether. Nobody has to use Binance. Nobody has to use any of these things. So I think it does give people a bit more freedom for a certain amount of time, just because there are choices that exist, right? So like, at some point it will be the case where you sort of like, your life is worse if you can't use Tether or you can't use Binance or something, but we're not there yet. And so while we're not there, there's a lot more freedom in terms of what you can do. And then the most important thing to remember as well is that, especially like with freezing, right? You freeze it, if it turns out that you're wrong, you can unfreeze it as well. So like, that's an important thing to keep in mind, is like, you have to have paths of recourse on both ends. So like, if you get hacked, there has to be a path of recourse. But if there's like an overstep of power, or an investigation goes this way and a market maker gets frozen instead or something like that, it should be very, very easy for that legitimate person who did not steal the funds to have a path of recourse as well. And these are the hard, messy, gray areas that we gotta figure out how they work and practice and experiment and honestly like fuck it up a little bit. Like accidentally freeze some people while the stakes are low, and so that we can build up all of the different systems and checks and balances that need to be in place before the damage is too great.
Right. Well, I think what you're doing is a public good for the space, and I just appreciate you taking the time to educate us. I hope that you write a book one day about all the hacks and things that you've seen. I feel like it's seriously like postmodern sci-fi level stuff. Given that we're out of time now, I guess I'll just ask you one sort of final open-ended question, which is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say?
I think the biggest thing that I just keep going back to is that, like, one, the system that we're talking about, like, it's not just this technology. It's like not just like your one little DeFi protocol. Like, the system includes your DeFi protocol, which operates on a specific chain, which interacts with other chains. It has users, like it has real people. They have addresses, they have assumptions, they have lives, they have money, they have financial stability or not stability. And then, it interacting with all the other things that are also on the blockchain. And that includes like some things that are centralized and some things that aren't. And so I think that, because just figuring out the design of your one little DeFi protocol is such a massive undertaking, people tend to just like ignore everything else. But the reality is like everything makes up the system, like every single thing. And like I'm sure of it, there are a million ways to change the incentives, to change the structures, to take advantage of the different, entities on like certain blockchains or in certain systems. For example, like the MEV bots that front run the hacks on accident. Like, how do you make your contract like more front runnable in a situation of a hack, right? Like, that's a question that one should ask and answer. I feel like most of the smart contracts I've built, I've been trying to prevent front running, but in the case of a hack, I guess you want the hacker to be able to be front run. So that's like, it's interesting. A lot of hacks, when there's like the white hat recoveries that are talked about a lot, but like a lot of the quieter ones where like all of a sudden like the hacker just like returned the fund. It turns out that the hacker that tried to hack it didn't get any money. Some random dude who runs like a MEV bot.
Oh, an MEV bot?
Woke up like, oh crap, like, I hacked whatever. And then, very quietly gets in touch with, a number of people and the funds like, get returned. But like those types of things, right? Like, that's the thing that I think excites me the most, is like, that's an example of the system as a whole, the system design on the whole, using all these different entities to incentivize the behavior that you want to get the outcomes that you want. Right now, like that's, I think that was all mostly inadvertent, but like, you know, if you incentivize that, right? If you incentivize front running of the hackers, you know, you're gonna have less loss due to hacks, I guess.
Wow. We're truly living in the future. I'm realizing as I'm talking to you. This feels very cypherpunk.
Yeah. And we'll hopefully not screw it up because there's a lot going on.
So I don't think I actually got an answer out of so 1 to 10, where do you think we are now in solving this?
1 to 10, probably like a 3.
Okay.
Yeah. But we like 0.
Okay. So progress is being made, but it's a long journey.
Yeah. And to get to a 10, like, I don't know, it's I think there's not like one answer. You have to do all the things. And and it'll take time, it'll take creativity, and it'll take humans. Don't forget the humans, please.
Yeah.
And
I think where this connects with my work is that, you know, we always talk about public goods as like climate change and open source funding and everything, but like people not getting hacked and being completely wiped out of the ecosystem is kind of a public good for the space. And so security, white hat work, I think, is public good for the space. And, you know, where my mind goes to is, you know, Consensys is really great at like sort of subsidizing the security work that you do. And, you know, how do we provide the funding and actually the humans who are staff the humans long-term who are working on creating this public good for the space is where my mind goes. But, you know, hope to have you back in a year or two. And hopefully if we're at a 3 out of 10 now, we can be at a 5 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10 in a couple of years. So really appreciate your contributions to the space, Taylor.
yeah, thank you so much for talking about all this random stuff.
Yeah, same to you. See you, Taylor.